For the backyard gardener, this may not be a very popular or commonly grown crop, but it's one that I've found a lot of success with in terms of growing and food production and things like that. And I'm talking about sorghum. Sorghum is a warm season grass. Being classified as that, it is, like corn, a C4 photosynthetic plant, which really just means, in basic terms, that it's super efficient at getting energy from the sun and collecting carbon dioxide. And because of its C4 photosynthetic pathway that it uses, it's able to grow pretty fast, even up here in colder, more northern climates. And it collects a lot of biomass, both above ground and below ground. The plant can get up to 7 or 8 feet tall, in my experience, and it can also send roots 4 to 6 feet deep down into the soil. And for this reason, it's used a lot for cover crop rotations, helping to decompact the soil, adding in some more carbon deeper into the soil, and helping to aerate the soil at a deeper level. When used as a cover crop, especially by broad-acre, more larger scale farmers, they may companion plant it with cowpeas or flax. I've found success planting it with beans, okra, squash, cucumbers. I really just kind of apply the Three Sisters method to it, using the sorghum in place of the corn. I've grown pole beans up the sorghum stalks while the cucumbers just kind of sprawl out underneath, creating a ground cover. Also, in particular garden beds, I've grown bush beans on either side of the sorghum, where I will plant the sorghum down the center aisle and then fill in the bush beans on either side. Sorghum is also able to grow in poorer soil conditions a lot more enthusiastically than corn would, and it may also have some allelopathic properties, suppressing the growth of certain weedy species, maybe some plants in the mustard family, or certain plants in the aster family, potentially. And so there's still a lot that we're still learning about it. Now, in terms of food and edibility, sorghum is commonly used for two main purposes. So one use is that it's grown as a grain, right? The seeds are edible, you can cook them up as you would oatmeal, and it can taste very similar. For me, it's a pretty agreeable flavor, and I could substitute it for oatmeal just about any time. Now, its second use is that its stalks can be pressed for juice, and this juice can then either be used as is or cooked further down and concentrated into a syrup. Sorghum is also fairly pest and disease resistant, but especially when these plants are young, they can be browsed by certain herbivores. Not necessarily too big of a deal for broad-acre agriculture, but for the backyard gardener, it can be absolutely infuriating. It's not too much of a problem for the larger scale broad-acre agriculture, but for the backyard gardener, it can be absolutely infuriating. That also brings up another point. Sorghum has also been grown for food for animals, for livestock. The grain has been used to some extent, although it can contain some pretty complex proteins, more so than other grains, and certain compounds which may be kind of harder for certain animals to digest. If you try to feed it to chickens, they may nibble at it a little bit. It may depend on the type of chickens you have, but sometimes they may tend to not really touch the sorghum seeds. Now, in terms of silage and harvesting the above ground biomass as a food source for animals, that's been done and used effectively, maybe even a little bit more effectively than the seed. You just have to watch out, because in certain conditions, the above ground plant matter can produce prussic acid, or the precursor to hydrogen cyanide, which is a deadly poison. Usually people may mitigate this by making sure that they're not harvesting the plant in a time of drought or other specific adverse conditions to help kind of prevent that. So in terms of sorghum seed viability, from my experience, I've had pretty good results for the seed lasting 2 years to 3 years, although it seems to be best if new seed is planted each year. That is, you harvest the seed in the fall, you save it over the winter time, and you plant it in the spring. This year I've been using seed that's been that's about 2 or maybe even 3 years old. So the germination success can be a little inconsistent. So what I've been doing this year is I've just been over sowing. If I'm planting sorghum out in the garden, maybe in each hole I'll throw in 5 or 6 seeds, and then however many sprout will sprout, and then I can go back to that a few weeks later once the plants and the root systems kind of develop a little bit, and then I'll just thin them out. I'll just take like a small gardening fork, and I'll just kind of lift it up, and I'll separate out the plants, and I'll leave one in that place, but I'll take any others that germinate and I will just plant them in other areas in the garden where I want to grow the sorghum. It does seem that the sorghum transplants pretty easily. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this video about growing sorghum. Maybe it's a plant that you want to incorporate into your own garden and experiment with to see what works best for you. So on that note, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Take care.